"It's a good thing your house is so big, Mom. Jessica's parents are going to live on the second floor, and the first floor will be for her sister and the kids. We're family. It's your obligation to take them in without saying a word." My son, Matthew, said those words as casually as if he were asking for a glass of water. He was standing in the middle of my living room, surrounded by suitcases and boxes, with Jessica by his side, smiling as if she had just announced wonderful news. Behind them, Robert and Susan watched the scene with expressions of satisfaction, like people who had already won a battle before it even began. Sarah, Matthew's sister, lingered near the entryway with her two small children, looking around as if she were already calculating which room would be hers. I said nothing. I remained completely still, the warm coffee mug in my hands. I looked at all of them, one by one, and in that instant, I understood that my own son had just tried to strip me of the only thing I had left: my home, my peace, my dignity. The silence that followed was so thick you could feel it on your skin. Matthew was waiting for an answer, maybe a smile of agreement, perhaps an, "Of course, son, whatever you need." But I just stared at him, without blinking, without moving. Then, in a voice so calm that it surprised even me, I said something that made everyone freeze right where they stood. Something that changed everything in a second. Something Matthew never imagined he would hear from my mouth. But to understand why I said what I said, and why my son dared to go so far, I need to tell you how this all started. Because this story did not begin that day in April. It began much earlier, when Matthew decided that my love as a mother was a weakness he could exploit. My name is Eleanor Vance. I am 68 years old, and I built my entire life with my own two hands. When my husband died 12 years ago, I was left alone in this two-story house that we had bought together after 30 years of marriage. He was a good man, hard-working, honest. It took us so much to get this property, but we did it. Every brick in these walls holds the sweat of our efforts. I worked for 42 years as a county clerk. It was not a glamorous job, but it was stable, and it gave me dignity. I learned to be disciplined, methodical, careful with money. I was never one to spend on unnecessary luxuries. I always saved thinking about the future, about the hard days that inevitably come. And they came, of course. First with my husband's illness, then with his death, then with the loneliness that settles into a house too large for one person. But I learned to live with that loneliness. More than that, I learned to enjoy it. I got up every morning with a purpose. I tended to my plants in the garden, kept the house clean and tidy, went for walks in the afternoons, and met with my friends on Sundays. I built a routine that gave me peace. I did not need much to be happy. I just needed my space, my tranquility, my independence. Matthew, my eldest son, was always affectionate with me. After his father's death, he started visiting more frequently. At first, he only came on weekends, sometimes with Jessica, his wife. We would talk, eat together. He would ask me how I was, if I needed anything. I appreciated those visits. They made me feel like I was not completely alone in the world, that I still had family, that I still mattered to someone. Over time, the visits became longer. Matthew started staying some weekdays, bringing work home, using the second-floor study as a makeshift office. Jessica came with him, always polite, always willing to help with the cooking or cleaning. It seemed genuine. It seemed like filial love. It seemed like respect. I opened the doors of my home to them because they were my family, because I trusted them, because I believed their presence was a blessing and not a strategy. How naive I was. It all started to change one afternoon last November. I was reviewing my bank statements, something I did religiously every month, when I noticed a strange transaction. A transfer for $3,000 that I had not authorized. My heart sped up. I immediately thought of fraud, of some thief who had gotten my information. I called the bank right away, demanding an explanation. The answer left me cold. The transfer had been made from my own account, using my login credentials, from an IP address that corresponded to my house. Someone had gotten onto my computer, used my personal information, and transferred my money without my consent. But it was not a stranger. It was not a common thief. It was my own son. When I confronted Matthew that same night, he did not deny anything. He sat on the living room sofa, hands between his knees, staring at the floor like a scolded child. Jessica was beside him, also silent, not daring to intervene. "I'm sorry, Mom," he finally said in a low voice. "I had a court judgment pending. If I didn't pay it this week, they were going to garnish my account. I just borrowed the money. I'll pay you back, I swear." Borrowed, as if my money were his, as if he had the right to go into my bank account and dispose of my savings without even asking me. I stared at him, trying to recognize the man I had raised, the little boy who used to play in this very yard, the young man who would hug me and tell me he would always take care of me. "When were you planning on telling me?" I asked, keeping my voice calm, even though a contained fury was making my hands tremble. "I was going to tell you, Mom. I just needed to solve the problem first. I didn't want to worry you." "You didn't want to worry me, but you did want to steal from me." "It's not stealing, Mom. We're family. We're blood. What's yours is mine." "No." Those words echoed in my head like an alarm. "What's yours is mine." Just like that. That's shameless. My son saw no problem with what he had done. To him, I was simply an available resource, a personal ATM, a mother obligated to solve his financial problems without question, without demanding respect. "I want my money back," I told him, with a firmness that surprised even Jessica. "The $3,000. By next week." Matthew nodded quickly. Too quickly. "Of course, Mom. I'll pay you back. I promise." But I saw something in his eyes that made my blood run cold. It was not regret. It was calculation. It was the look of someone already thinking about the next move, the next excuse, the next way to get what he wanted. That night, when Matthew and Jessica finally left, I stayed alone in the living room with the lights off, watching the shadows the moon cast on the walls. Something had broken between us. Something that perhaps could never be repaired. And worst of all, a part of me already knew it. Matthew was not going to pay me back that money. He never would. Because to him I was not his mother. I was his personal bank. 2 weeks passed, and Matthew never once mentioned the $3,000. He came to visit as if nothing had happened, as if there were no outstanding debt between us, as if I were foolish enough to forget what he had done. I said nothing during those days. I just watched, waited, made a mental note of every gesture, every word, every uncomfortable silence when the topic of money brushed up against the conversation. Jessica acted normally, making coffee in my kitchen, arranging the flowers in the living room vase, talking about the weather and the news as if everything were perfectly fine. But I saw the tension in her shoulders, the way she avoided my gaze when Matthew and I were in the same room. She knew. She knew her husband had stolen from me and had done nothing to stop it. One afternoon, while Matthew was checking his phone on the sofa, I decided to break the silence. "When are you planning to pay me back my money, son?" He looked up slowly, as if my question had pulled him from a deep sleep. Jessica stopped stirring her teaspoon in her teacup. The silence settled between us like an unwelcome guest. "Oh yeah, Mom. I'm getting the money together. It's been a tough month at work. But don't worry, I'll pay you back." "When exactly?" "Soon. I promise. Soon." That empty word people use when they have no intention of following through. Soon could mean a week, a month, a year, never. I knew that game. I had seen it before in other people, in other contexts, but I never thought I would see it from my own son. "I'll give you until the end of the month," I said, with a firmness that made Jessica sit bolt upright in her chair. "If you don't return the money by then, I'm going to take legal action." Matthew let out a nervous, incredulous laugh. "Legal action? Mom, I'm your son. You can't be serious." "I've never been more serious in my life." He stared at me as if he did not recognize me, as if the woman sitting across from him were a stranger who had taken the place of his submissive, accommodating mother. Jessica intervened then, her voice soft, conciliatory. "Eleanor, please. Matthew is going to pay you. He just needs a little more time. We're going through some financial trouble, but we'll sort it out. We're family." Family. That word used as a shield, as a justification for any abuse, for any lack of respect. I wondered how many times in my life I had tolerated unacceptable things simply because they came wrapped in that sacred concept of family. "Family is built on respect," I replied, looking directly at Jessica. And respect includes not stealing from your own mother. Matthew stood up abruptly, clearly annoyed. I didn't steal from you, Mom. I just borrowed. There's a difference. The difference is that when you borrow, you ask permission first. You went into my account without my authorization. That has a name, and it isn't borrowing. He left the house, slamming the door. Jessica shot me a reproachful look before following him. I was left alone in the living room, the echo of the door reverberating off the walls. I did not feel guilt. I did not feel regret. I only felt a cold, crystal clarity. My son had shown his true colors, and I had just decided that I was not going to be his victim anymore. The following days were filled with absolute silence. Matthew did not visit again, did not call, did not send messages. It was his way of punishing me, of making me feel guilty for having dared to demand what was mine. But I did not take the bait. I continued with my routine, tended my plants, went for my walks, read my books. The peace of my house returned, and with it, a sense of freedom I had forgotten. Until one night, 2 weeks later, my phone rang. It was Matthew. Mom, I need to talk to you. It's urgent. His voice sounded different, softer, more vulnerable. Part of me wanted to believe him, wanted to think that maybe he had reflected, that maybe he was calling to genuinely apologize. But another part, the part that had learned to be wary, stayed on high alert. What is it about? It's about Susan, Jessica's mom. She and Robert are in a really tough spot. They have money problems. They lost their savings in a bad investment, and now they can't pay the rent on their apartment. They're being given 30 days to evict. I listened to his story in silence, waiting for the moment he would get to the real reason for his call. They need help, Mom. Just about $2,000 to get current on their payments. I know we just had that issue with the money, but this is different. It's a real emergency. There it was, the request, the real motive. And the most incredible part was that Matthew truly seemed to believe I would agree after everything that had happened. Matthew, the answer is no. What do you mean, no? Mom, they're my wife's parents. They're family. They're your in-laws. They are not my responsibility. And even if they were, I'm not lending money that I know I'll never get back. You're still in debt to me, in case you forgot. Mom, please. I promise this time is different. They'll pay the money back as soon as they sort out their situation. No, Matthew, and I don't want to talk about this again. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. When Matthew spoke again, his voice had lost all its warmth. Fine, Mom, I understand. I just didn't realize you'd become so selfish. He hung up before I could reply. I was left holding the phone, feeling a mix of anger and sadness. Selfish. He called me selfish because I refused to gift my money to people I did not know, who had never shown me any appreciation, who did not even have the decency to ask me themselves. 2 days later, while checking my bank account again, I discovered another unauthorized transfer. This time, it was for exactly $2,000. I felt my blood boil. Matthew had done it again. He had gone back into my account, taken my money without permission again, and this time he had not even bothered to invent an excuse for it himself. I called him immediately. He answered on the third ring, his voice cautious. Mom, you just transferred $2,000 from my account. Are you going to deny it? Silence. A silence that confirmed everything. Mom, let me explain. There's nothing to explain, Matthew. You lied to me. I told you I wouldn't help Jessica's parents, and you decided to take the money anyway. Do you know what that's called? Theft. Pure and simple. It's not theft when it's to help family. Susan and Robert are desperate. What did you want me to do? Let them end up on the street? I wanted you to respect my decision. I wanted you to understand that my money is mine, not yours. But apparently that's too much to ask. Mom, you have enough money. You live alone, you don't spend it on anything. What's the big deal about helping? Those words hit me with the force of a terrible revelation. To Matthew, I was not a person with needs, with plans, with the right to decide about my own assets. I was simply an untapped resource, a bank account that should be available to him and whoever he chose. It costs me my dignity, Matthew. It costs me my peace of mind. It costs me the trust I once had in you. You were always so dramatic, Mom. And you were always so opportunistic, son. I hung up before he could respond. My hands were shaking. My heart was pounding. But this time, it was not just anger I felt. It was something deeper, more painful. It was the final understanding that my son was not going to change, that every promise he had made me was empty, that every apology was just a strategy to buy time until the next theft. I could not sleep that night. A week after the second theft, Matthew showed up at my house as if nothing had happened. He wore a forced smile and carried a box of pastries, my favorite, as if a simple gesture could erase what he had done. I was watering the plants in the garden when I saw him arrive. I said nothing. I just watched him approach with that attitude of a child who knows he did something wrong but expects to be forgiven anyway. "Mom, we need to talk," he said, placing the box on the patio table. "I have nothing to talk to you about, Matthew. Please, just give me 5 minutes. After that, if you want me to leave, I'll leave and won't bother you again." Something in his tone made me pause. It was not arrogance. It was something like desperation. I put the watering can aside and sat in one of the garden chairs. He took the seat opposite me, his hands clasped on the table. "I know you're angry with me. You have every right. What I did was wrong. I shouldn't have taken the money without your permission. But Mom, I need you to understand that I did it because I had no other choice. Jessica's parents were going to be on the street. What kind of son-in-law would I be if I let them suffer when I could help? The kind of son-in-law who respects his own mother?" I replied without hesitation. "The kind of son who doesn't steal to look good in front of his in-laws." Matthew looked down. For a moment, I thought I might have broken through that armor of justifications he had built around his actions, but then he looked up, and I saw there was no real remorse in his eyes. There was only exhaustion, frustration at having to explain himself. "Look, Mom, I know I made a mistake, but it's done. The money is already used. Susan and Robert were able to pay their debt, and now they're fine. Can't we just put this behind us and move on?" "Move on? Matthew, you stole $5,000 from me in total. $5,000. And now you're asking me to forget it as if it were nothing. I'll pay you back every cent. Just give me time." "I already gave you time. I gave you my trust. I gave you access to my home, my life, everything I have, and all you did was take advantage." He fell silent, looking out at the garden. I kept talking, because I needed him to hear it, even though I knew he probably was not really listening to my words. "Do you know what hurts the most, Matthew? It's not the money. Money can be replaced. What hurts is realizing that to you, I'm just a means to get what you want. I'm not your mother. I'm your personal ATM. Don't say that, Mom. You know I love you. Love without respect isn't love. It's manipulation." Matthew sighed, clearly annoyed by the turn of the conversation. He stood up and walked a few steps toward the garden fence, turning his back to me. "Susan wants to get to know you better," he said suddenly, changing the subject. "She's celebrating her birthday next Saturday. A small gathering, just close family. Jessica and I want you to come." The idea of spending an afternoon with Matthew's in-laws, the very people he had gifted my money to without consulting me, was absurd, but something in his request sounded more like an order disguised as an invitation. As if my attendance were mandatory, part of a larger plan I could not yet grasp. "I don't think that's a good idea. Mom, please. It's important to Jessica. She really wants you to integrate more with her family. Besides, it would be a good opportunity for you to see that Susan and Robert are good people. Maybe then you'll understand why it was so important to me to help them." There was something in his insistence that made me uncomfortable. But I was also tired of fighting, tired of the constant tension. And a part of me, a foolish, hopeful part, thought that maybe if I got to know these in-laws, if I saw their situation with my own eyes, I could find some peace with what had happened. "All right," I said finally. "I'll go." The smile that appeared on Matthew's face was one of triumph, not joy. I should have noticed it then. I should have realized something was wrong. But I did not. I still wanted to believe my son was capable of acting with good intentions. Saturday arrived too quickly. Matthew picked me up in his car at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Jessica was in the passenger seat, wearing an elegant dress and flawless makeup. She greeted me with a smile that did not reach her eyes. Susan and Robert's place was in a modest neighborhood, about 30 minutes from mine. It was a small apartment in an old building, with walls that needed painting and an elevator that made worrying noises. When we arrived, several people were already gathered in the living room. Music, laughter, the smell of homemade food filling the air. Susan greeted me with an exaggerated hug, as if we were lifelong friends. She was a woman my age, maybe a couple of years younger, with hair dyed an artificial brown and a smile too wide to be genuine. "Eleanor, what a joy you came. Matthew has told us so much about you." I wondered what exactly Matthew had told them. Nothing good, probably. Robert, her husband, was a burly man with a loud voice and rough manners. He shook my hand too hard and guided me into the living room where the rest of the guests were chatting animatedly. I was introduced to aunts, cousins, neighbors. Everyone seemed to have known each other forever. I was clearly the outsider in this group. For the first hour, everything went normally. I ate something, had a soda, and exchanged polite words with a few people. Matthew and Jessica were always nearby, watching, making sure I was comfortable. Or so it seemed. But then, after they had cut the cake and people were starting to relax with a few more drinks, Robert raised his glass and called for silence. "I want to make a toast," he announced in his booming voice. "To my wife, Susan, who turns 65 today and is still the most beautiful and cunning woman I know." Everyone laughed and applauded. I smiled politely, too, hoping the toast would end soon so I could go back to my quiet corner. But Robert was not finished. "And I also want to toast to being here, in our home, despite the difficulties. Because thanks to certain generous people, we were able to pull through and celebrate this day as a family." He cast a significant glance toward Matthew, who smiled uncomfortably. Some guests murmured their approval. I felt that something bad was about to happen. "Of course, there are people who are generous of their own free will," Robert continued, his tone starting to sound mocking, "and there are people who are generous because they have no other choice. People who have so much money saved up they don't even know what to do with it, but they play hard to get when their own family needs help." The silence that followed was uncomfortable. Several people shifted their gaze toward me. Robert remained standing, his glass held high, with a smile that revealed exactly what he thought of me. "There are people who live alone in huge houses," he went on, and now his voice had a cutting edge, with empty rooms and full bank accounts, but they don't have enough heart to help others. People who cling to their money as if they're going to take it to the grave. I remained completely motionless. I felt everyone's eyes fixed on me. Matthew was staring at the floor. Jessica was holding her glass so tightly her knuckles were white. No one said anything. No one defended me. "Good thing my son-in-law has more humanity than his own mother," Robert finished, finally lowering his glass. "That's why we're here today, because Matthew does know what family means." Some guests raised their glasses in silence, clearly uncomfortable. Others just looked away. I remained seated, feeling the humiliation burn my skin, feeling the rage rise in my throat like hot lava. But I said nothing. I did not scream. I did not get up to leave. I just looked at Matthew. My son, my own son, was standing next to Robert, head bowed, without saying a single word in my defense. The ride back to my house was the longest of my life. Matthew drove in silence, his hands gripping the steering wheel. Jessica stared out the window, avoiding any eye contact with me in the rearview mirror. I sat in the back seat, my gaze fixed on the back of my son's head, wondering how I had come to this point. How I had raised a man incapable of defending his own mother. I did not say a single word during the entire trip. Not because I had nothing to say, but because I had too much. And I knew that if I opened my mouth, all that would come out would be pure venom. So I kept quiet. I waited. I watched. When we finally reached my house, Matthew stopped the car at the gate, but he did not turn off the engine. He was going to drop me off and leave, as if nothing had happened. As if what had just occurred was normal, acceptable. I opened the car door, and before getting out, I turned to him. "The next time someone humiliates me in front of other people and you stand there silently, it will be the last time you ever see me." My voice came out calm, almost soft, but the weight of those words made Matthew finally turn to look at me. I saw something in his eyes, maybe surprise, maybe fear, but I did not see remorse. "Mom, I don't want to hear it right now, Matthew. I need you to leave." I got out of the car and shut the door without waiting for a reply. I walked to my house without looking back. I heard the car's engine drive away only when I was already inside, with the door locked behind me. I could not sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Robert's face mocking me, the guests' stifled laughter, my son's cowardly silence. I felt betrayed in a way I had never experienced before. It was not just the stolen money. It was not just the lies. It was the absolute lack of respect, the certainty that to Matthew I was expendable, an inconvenient obstacle between him and the approval of his in-laws. 3 weeks passed without Matthew coming to visit. 3 weeks of absolute silence. I did not call him. He did not call me. It was as if we were both waiting for the other to make the first move, for the other to admit their mistake. But I knew that day would not come. Matthew did not believe he had done anything wrong. In his mind, I was the one in the wrong for not understanding, for not being more flexible, for not sacrificing myself without complaint for his and his wife's happiness. One Saturday morning, while I was having breakfast in my kitchen, I heard the doorbell ring. I was not expecting visitors. When I opened the door, I found Sarah, Matthew's sister, standing on my doorstep with a small suitcase and a nervous smile. "Hi, Eleanor. I hope I'm not bothering you. I was just passing through town and thought I'd stay a few days with you. You know, to keep you company." Sarah had never shown much interest in visiting me before. In fact, we barely saw each other at Christmas or family birthdays. Her showing up like this, unannounced, with a packed suitcase, made me immediately suspicious. Passing through? To where? "Oh, I have some business to take care of nearby. I thought it would be more comfortable to stay with you than in a hotel. We're family." No. There was that word again. Family. The universal shield to justify any abuse. "Sarah, I appreciate you thinking of me, but this isn't a good time. I'm busy with several personal matters." Her smile froze. "But Eleanor, it'll only be 2 or 3 nights. I won't be any trouble, I promise. Besides, Matthew told me you'd be happy to have me." Of course, Matthew. He was behind this, sending his sister as a scout, testing the boundaries, seeing if I had lowered my guard. Matthew has no authority to decide who enters my house, and my answer is no. Sarah's expression changed completely. The fake sweetness vanished and was replaced by barely concealed irritation. "Are you serious, Eleanor? You live alone in this huge house, and you can't put up family for a few days? How selfish. This is my house, not a hotel. Matthew was right about you. You've become a bitter old woman." I closed the door in her face without another word. I heard her curse on the other side before dragging her suitcase away. I stood in the hallway, heart pounding, feeling a mix of satisfaction and worry. Satisfaction at having set a clear boundary. Worry because I knew this was not going to end here. And it did not end. On Sunday afternoon, while I was reading in the garden, I heard voices from the other side of the gate. I looked up and saw a car parked in front of my house. Robert and Susan got out, carrying bags and suitcases. Matthew appeared behind them, with Jessica at his side. They did not wait for me to open the gate. Matthew had a copy of the keys I had given him years ago, back when I still trusted him. They all came in together, like a coordinated invasion, walking through my garden as if it were their own territory. I stood up slowly, leaving the book on the table. I watched them approach with a calm that probably unnerved them. "What is going on here?" I asked, even though I already knew the answer. Matthew stepped forward, taking on his role as the group's spokesman. "Mom, Jessica's parents need a place to stay for a few days. There was a problem with their apartment. A water leak that damaged everything. While it's being repaired, we thought they could stay here. You have plenty of room." "We thought?" "Who, exactly, we?" "All of us. It's the logical decision. You're their family now." "I didn't decide anything. And they are not my family." Susan stepped forward, with that condescending smile I already found unbearable. "Eleanor, please. It's just for a few days. We won't be a bother. In fact, we can help you with the house, with the shopping, whatever you need." "I don't need help, I need privacy, and you are not welcome here." The silence that followed was tense. Robert dropped his suitcase with a heavy thud, clearly annoyed. "I can't believe your attitude. After everything Matthew did for us, using his own money, My money, I interrupted him. He used my money. Money he stole from my account without my permission. So don't tell me stories about generosity. Matthew turned pale. Jessica exchanged a nervous glance with her mother. Clearly, Susan and Robert did not know the whole truth about where that $2,000 had come from. It doesn't matter where the money came from, Susan said quickly, trying to regain control of the situation. The important thing is that we need your help now. We're family, Eleanor. Families support each other in tough times. Families respect each other, I replied, my voice so cold it surprised even me. And not one of you has shown me the slightest respect since the day we met. I turned to Matthew. I want everyone off my property, now, and give me back my house keys. Mom, you're overreacting. The keys. Matthew. Now. Something in my tone must have made him understand I was not playing. He slowly reached into his pocket and pulled out the keychain. He placed it on the garden table without looking me in the eye. Leave, I said, pointing toward the gate. All of you. And don't come back unless I invite you. Robert let out a bitter laugh. You're a heartless woman. A selfish person who'd rather live alone in her palace than help her own family. This house is not a palace. It's my home. The home I built with my work, with my effort, with the sweat of years of sacrifice. And nobody, absolutely nobody, has the right to come in here without my permission and make me feel guilty for protecting what's mine. Susan opened her mouth to argue, but Jessica took her by the arm. Mom, let's go. This is pointless. One by one, they picked up their things and walked to the gate. Matthew was the last to move. He stood in front of me, an expression of disbelief on his face. I can't believe you're doing this. I can't believe you tried it. He left without another word. I watched them drive away from my garden, get in the car, and leave. When the sound of the engine faded into the distance, I locked the gate and walked back to my house. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe. The days that followed were strangely calm. My house was mine again, just mine, with no unexpected visits, no demands disguised as requests, no reproachful looks. I returned to my routine with a relief I had not felt in months. I watered my plants every morning, made my coffee without rushing, and read in the garden during the afternoons. It was as if I had reclaimed a piece of myself that had been lost. But that peace came at a price, and that price was the certainty that I had lost my son. Not physically, but emotionally. The bond that united us had broken, or perhaps it had only been revealed for what it always was. Fragile, conditional, built on expectations I was no longer willing to meet. One afternoon, while having tea in the kitchen, I received a call from an unknown number. I hesitated before answering, but something made me pick up the phone. Eleanor Vance. It was a woman's voice, polite but with an authoritative tone that immediately put me on alert. Yes, this is she. Who is speaking? This is Susan, Jessica's mother. My first reaction was to hang up, but curiosity got the better of me. I wanted to know what new strategy they had devised, what new attack was disguised as courtesy. What do you want, Susan? I want to talk to you, woman to woman. No intermediaries. Not Matthew, not Jessica, just you and me. I have nothing to talk to you about. I think you do, because what's happening between you and Matthew affects all of us, and I think it's time someone told you a few truths. There was something in her tone that irritated me deeply. That barely disguised superiority. That certainty that she had the right to give me lessons on how to be a mother. Go ahead. I'm listening. Eleanor, you treat your son like he's a stranger. You control him. You judge him. You make him feel guilty for wanting to help his family. Matthew is a grown man, married, with responsibilities. And you still treat him like he's a child who needs your permission for everything. I felt the rage rise in my throat like a hot wave. I control him. Susan, your son-in-law stole $5,000 from me. Not once, but twice. He went into my bank account without my permission and transferred my money as if it were his. Does that seem normal to you? What seems normal to me is that you're a possessive mother who can't stand her son having his own life. Matthew did what he did because he knew you'd refuse to help, because you always refuse, because you'd rather hoard your money like a dragon than share it with your family. My money is mine. I earned it. I saved it. And I have the right to decide what to do with it. I don't have to finance the problems of people I don't even know. Those people are your daughter-in-law's parents. They're part of your family now. They are part of Matthew's family. Not mine. There's a difference. Susan let out a dismissive laugh. You're unbelievable, Eleanor. You live alone in that huge house, with no one visiting you, no one who loves you, and you still cling to your money and your pride as if they're the only things you have. Let me tell you something. One day, you're going to need help. You're going to be sick or lonely or scared. And in that moment, you're going to remember all the times you rejected your own family. And no one is going to be there for you. Her words hit me harder than I wanted to admit. Not because she was right, but because they touched on a fear that lived in the back of my mind. The fear of loneliness, of old age, of vulnerability. But I did not give her the satisfaction of knowing she had affected me. If that day comes, Susan, I'd rather face it alone than surrounded by people who only see me as a walking ATM. Now, if you're finished insulting me, I have things to do. You're digging your own grave, Eleanor. And when you're in it, don't expect Matthew to come and cry for you. She hung up before I could reply. I was left holding the phone, shaking with rage, not because of what she had said, but because of the cruelty with which she had said it. And the worst part was knowing that Matthew had allowed this woman to speak to me like that. Maybe he had even encouraged her to do it. That night, as I was making dinner, I received a text message from Matthew. It was brief, almost cold. Mom, Susan told me what you two talked about. She didn't have to be so rude to you, but you didn't have to treat her like that either. She was just trying to help. I did not respond. There was no point. Anything I said would be twisted, misinterpreted, used against me. The next day, I had a visit from my friend Victoria, a woman my age whom I had known for over 20 years. We had met at work and had maintained a solid friendship through the years. She was one of the few people I could speak to with complete honesty. We sat in the garden with coffee and cookies. I told her everything. The stolen money, the humiliations, Susan's call, Matthew's silence. Victoria listened without interrupting, with the kind of patience only true friends have. When I finished, she sighed deeply and looked at me with a mix of sadness and clarity. Eleanor, can I ask you something in all honesty? Of course. Why do you keep tolerating all this? Why don't you just cut ties with Matthew completely if he's causing you this much pain? The question caught me off guard, because the truth was, I had asked it of myself hundreds of times, and the answer was always the same, even if it was hard to admit, because I still hope he'll change, that he'll remember who raised him, that he'll remember the values I tried to teach him. Victoria shook her head slowly. Eleanor, he didn't forget those values. He just decided they don't serve him. People don't change, dear. They just learn to hide their true intentions better. Her words stuck in my chest like needles. Because, deep down, I knew she was right. Matthew was not going to wake up one day transformed into the son I hoped he would be. He was who he was. And who he was someone willing to betray me over and over again if it suited him. So, what do I do? I asked, feeling for the first time in a long time that I truly had no answers. You protect what's yours. Your house, your money, your peace. And you let Matthew live his life without you. If one day he decides to return with genuine respect, you can consider it. But in the meantime, don't give him any more power over you. Victoria left an hour later, but her words stayed with me like a constant echo. That night, lying in my bed staring at the ceiling, I made a decision. I was not going to keep being a victim of my son's manipulation. I was not going to keep waiting for him to change. I was going to live my life on my own terms. Without guilt, without fear, without expectations. 3 days later, I received an email that would change everything. It was from a community organization in another city, inviting me to coordinate a literacy project for seniors. It was a volunteer position, but it came with housing included, and the chance to start a new chapter far away from all this pain. The offer arrived like a sign from the universe. A way out. An opportunity to start over in a place where no one knew my story, where I could just be Eleanor, not the disappointed mother, not the selfish woman, not the walking ATM. I seriously thought about accepting. I imagined what it would be like to pack up my things, sell the house, cut all ties, and just leave. The idea was tempting, liberating, but also terrifying. I called Matthew to tell him, not because I needed his permission, but because I felt he deserved to know, that he deserved to see the consequences of his actions. He answered on the third ring, his voice tired. "Mom, Matthew, I received a job offer in another city. It's an important project. I'd be gone for several months, maybe longer." There was a long silence. When he spoke, his voice sounded different, vulnerable, scared. "You're going to leave? You're going to leave me? You already left me, Matthew. A long time ago, when you decided your loyalty was with Jessica's family and not with me." "Mom, I never wanted." "It doesn't matter what you wanted. It matters what you did. And what you did was break my trust, over and over again. So yes, I'm considering leaving, starting fresh, far away from all this. Please, don't. We can fix things. I can change." "That's the thing, Matthew. I don't think you can. And I don't have the energy to keep waiting." I hung up before he could answer. That night, as I reviewed the email from the organization, I made a decision. I was not going to leave. Not because Matthew had asked me not to, but because this house was mine, this land was mine, this life was mine, and I was not going to be chased out of my own home by anyone. If someone had to leave, it was not going to be me. I replied to the community organization's email, thanking them for the offer, but declining the invitation. I wrote that I had personal matters to resolve here, in my city, in my home. I did not mention that those personal matters had a name and a face. I did not mention that I had just decided I was not going to run away from my own life. I stood by my bedroom window, looking at the garden I had cultivated for years, the flowers I had planted with my own hands, the trees that had grown with me. This house had my essence in every corner. I had cried here, I had laughed here, I had grown old here. I was not going to abandon it out of fear or exhaustion. I was not going to hand them that victory. The following days were quiet, almost too quiet. Matthew did not call again after our last conversation. He did not send messages. He did not show up at my door. It was as if he had decided to punish me with his absence, waiting for me to break, for me to miss him so much that I would end up caving to all his demands. But I did not break. Every day that passed without him made me stronger, more certain of my decision. I began to enjoy the solitude that used to terrify me. I cooked meals just for myself, watched the movies I wanted to watch, organized my time without having to justify anything to anyone. It was liberating. Until one afternoon in July, 2 months after I had thrown them out of my house, the phone rang. This time it was a number I recognized. "Matthew. Mom, I need to talk to you. It's urgent. Please." There was something in his voice that made me pause. It was not manipulation. It was genuine desperation. "What happened?" "It's Robert, Jessica's dad. He's sick. He needs heart surgery." "It's serious, Mom. Very serious." I waited in silence, knowing what was coming next. The surgery costs $15,000. The insurance only covers part of it. We need another $8,000 to be able to do it. If he doesn't have it soon, the doctors say, they say he might not make it. And you're calling me. Why? Because we don't have anyone else. Mom, Jessica, and I have used up all our savings. Susan has no money. Jessica's siblings can't help either. You're our last option. Our last option. Those words echoed in my head with painful clarity. I was not his first option. I was not someone Matthew turned to because he valued or respected me. I was the last resort, the backup plan, the person he only called when everything else had failed. "Matthew, I'm very sorry about what's happening to Robert. I truly am, but I am not giving you that money." There was a silence so profound I thought he had hung up. But then I heard his short, sharp breath, as if he were holding back tears. "Why, Mom? Why are you so cruel?" "I'm not being cruel. I'm being realistic. I've already spent my health and my money on people who didn't know how to be grateful, on people who humiliated me, stole from me, disrespected me. Now, that money is for me, for my old age, for my peace of mind, for my future. Not to save a man who insulted me in his own home while you stood by silently. He was drunk that day. He didn't mean it. That doesn't change anything, Matthew. Drunk words are sober thoughts. And that day, Robert made it very clear what he thinks of me. Why would I want to help someone like that? Because he's a human being. Because he's sick. Because his life is at risk. And because he's your wife's father. I understand that, but that doesn't make him my responsibility. Matthew exploded. His voice rose, loaded with rage and frustration. You're selfish, a cold, heartless woman. You have money sitting in the bank doing nothing. And you'd rather leave it there than save a life. That money is doing something, Matthew. It's giving me security. It's allowing me to sleep soundly, knowing that if I get sick, if I need surgery, if I have an emergency, I'll be able to pay for it. Because no one is going to come rescue me. No one is going to knock on my door offering selfless help. I would help you. You? The same person who stole $5,000 from me and never paid it back? The same person who allowed his in-laws to insult me to my face? The same person who disappeared for 2 months because you didn't get what you wanted from me? Forgive me, son, but your word isn't worth anything to me anymore. I heard a sob on the other end of the line. Matthew was crying. Part of me wanted to give in. Wanted to tell him it would be all right, that we would find a solution. But the stronger part, the part that had learned to protect itself, held firm. I'm sorry, Matthew. My answer is no. And this time, it's final. I hung up the phone before he could keep talking. My hands were shaking, my heart was pounding, but I did not feel guilty. I felt clear. I felt free. Half an hour later, I received a flood of text messages. First from Jessica, begging me to reconsider, telling me her father was a good man, that he had made mistakes but did not deserve to die for them. Then from Susan, with messages full of insults and accusations. She called me greedy, miserable, a soulless monster. She told me that one day I too would be sick and alone, and that no one would come to help me because I had chosen this. I blocked all their numbers, one by one, without hesitation. That night, Victoria came to visit. I had told her over the phone what had happened, and she insisted on coming to keep me company. We sat in the living room with wine and cheese, like two friends who had survived similar battles. Do you think I did the right thing? I asked her, even though I already knew the answer. I think you did the only thing you could do. Protect yourself. I feel terrible. A man is sick, maybe dying, and I have the money to help him, but I'm refusing. Eleanor, listen to me carefully. You are not responsible for Robert's health. You are not responsible for Matthew and Jessica's financial problems. You are not responsible for fixing the lives of people who have treated you like garbage. Your only responsibility is to yourself. But it's my son who's suffering. Your son is suffering the consequences of his own decisions. He chose to marry Jessica. He chose to align with his in-laws. He chose to steal from you and humiliate you. Those were all his decisions. And now he has to live with them. Victoria was right. I knew it. But that did not make the weight on my chest any lighter. 3 weeks passed. I heard nothing from Matthew during that time. I did not know if Robert had gotten the surgery, if he had survived, if he had died. Part of me wanted to know. Another part preferred ignorance. Until one Saturday morning, as I was watering my plants, I heard the sound of a car parking in front of my house. I looked up and saw Matthew getting out of the vehicle. He was alone. He walked toward the gate with slow steps, as if every foot cost him enormous effort. I opened the gate, but I did not invite him in. We stood there, facing each other, separated by a few feet of distance that felt like an abyss. How's Robert? I finally asked. He survived. We got the money. Jessica sold her car. Susan pawned her jewelry. I took out a loan that I'll be paying off for years. But we got it. The surgery was successful. He's recovering. I felt an unexpected relief. Not because I particularly cared about Robert, but because it meant Matthew could not hold his father-in-law's death over my head forever. I'm glad, I said sincerely. Matthew looked at me with tired, empty eyes. I came to tell you something, Mom. Something I should have told you a long time ago. I waited in silence. You're right. About everything. I treated you badly. I used you. I disrespected you. And the worst part is, I did it consciously. I knew it was wrong, but it was convenient for me, so I did it anyway, and now I'm paying the price. What price? Jessica and I are on the verge of divorce. She blames me for not getting your help. She says if I were a better son, you would have helped. Susan won't speak to me. Robert won't either. They all see me as a failure. And maybe they're right. I said nothing. I did not know what to say. I also came to tell you something else, he continued, his voice trembling. I found an apartment to rent. I'm moving out. Away from Jessica, away from her family, away from this whole disaster. I need to start over. I need to find out who I am without all this pressure. That sounds good, I replied honestly. That's it? That sounds good? What do you want me to say, Matthew? That I'm proud? That I forgive you? I'm not ready for either of those things. But I am glad you're making decisions for yourself, even if they're painful. He just stared at me, his expression one of total defeat. Matthew stood there in front of me, waiting for something more. A word of comfort, perhaps, a promise that everything would be all right. But I had nothing left to give him. I had spent all my compassion, all my patience, all my capacity to forgive without consequences. What was left was just a harder version of myself, a version that had learned to set boundaries even when it hurt. That's all? He finally asked, his voice barely audible. What else were you expecting, Matthew? I don't know. Maybe for you to tell me you still love me, that I'm still your son, despite everything. I looked him in the eyes. Those eyes that were once a little boy's, running through this very garden, hugging me when he had nightmares, telling me I was the best mom in the world. You will always be my son. That doesn't change. But love without respect is just a way of hurting yourself. And I am no longer willing to hurt myself for anyone. Not even for you. Matthew nodded slowly, as if he had finally understood something he had been trying to deny for months. He turned around and walked to his car. I watched him leave for the second time, but this time was different. This time, I did not feel guilt. I only felt a deep, clean sadness, like the quiet after a storm has passed. The weeks that followed were strangely peaceful. Matthew kept his word and moved into his own apartment. I heard nothing more from Jessica or her parents. It was as if that entire chapter of my life had slammed shut, leaving me at a new beginning I had not asked for but desperately needed. I started going out more. I rejoined a yoga class I had abandoned years ago. I joined a book club at the local library. I met new people, people who knew nothing of my history with Matthew, people who saw me simply as Eleanor, a 68-year-old woman with her own interests and a life ahead of her. Victoria remained my confidant, my closest friend. One afternoon, while we were having coffee at her house, she told me something that stuck with me. Do you know what I admire most about you, Eleanor? You didn't become bitter. So many women in your situation would have closed themselves off from the world, would have turned their pain into resentment. But you chose to grow. You chose to move forward. I don't always feel that way, I admitted. Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night and wonder if I did the right thing. If I was too harsh. If I should have given Matthew one more chance. Those moments of doubt are normal. But look at yourself now. You're more alive than ever. More yourself. Isn't that proof enough that you made the right decision? She was right. For the first time in years, I felt whole. I did not need my son's validation to know my worth. I did not need to sacrifice myself to feel useful. I was enough, just being me. But as life often goes, the calm never lasts forever. One Tuesday afternoon, 3 months after our last conversation, Matthew appeared at my door again. This time, he was not alone. He brought Sarah, his sister, who greeted me with a shy smile. Mom, can we come in? We need to talk to you about something important. I hesitated. Every fiber of my being told me to say no, to close the door and leave them outside. But there was something in Matthew's expression that made me reconsider. It was not manipulation. It was something like genuine nervousness. I let them in. We sat in the living room. Sarah fidgeted with her hands, clearly uncomfortable. Matthew spoke first. Mom, Sarah and I have been talking a lot lately. About what happened. About how we treated you. And we both want to apologize. Genuinely. Sarah nodded quickly. It's true, Eleanor. I acted terribly when I just showed up expecting you to take me in. It wasn't fair. And, well, Matthew told me everything that happened with the money in Jessica's family. I didn't know about any of that. If I had, I would have talked to him. Why are you really here? I asked, tired of preambles. Matthew took a deep breath. I came to propose something. A new beginning. A way to rebuild what we broke. I want us to wipe the slate clean. To start over as if none of this ever happened. You can't start over when there's a $5,000 debt in the middle. That's just it. I want to pay you back that money. I don't have it all now, but I can start paying you monthly. $200 a month until it's completely paid off. The offer took me by surprise. Not because it was generous, it was not. $200 a month meant more than 2 years of payments. But it was the first time Matthew had formally acknowledged the debt. The first time he had put concrete numbers and timelines on it. And what do you want in return? Nothing. Just for you to give me a chance to prove I can change, that I can be the son you deserve. I looked at Sarah, who remained silent. And what's your role in this? I just came to support my brother. And to apologize to you, too. I know we don't have a close relationship, but I'd like that to change. I'd like us to be a real family. There was sincerity in their words. Or at least it seemed that way. But I had learned to be wary of pretty promises. Promises were only as good as the consistent actions that backed them up. I accept the payments, I said finally, but with conditions. No surprise visits. No additional requests for money. No involving third parties in our relationship. If you want to rebuild trust, you're going to have to do it with actions, not words. Matthew nodded enthusiastically. Of course, Mom. Whatever you say. They left half an hour later. Matthew left me an envelope with the first $200 in cash. I stared at that envelope for a long time after they left, wondering if it was really possible for people to change. If Matthew could keep his promise. If I could ever trust him again. For the next 2 months, Matthew delivered. Every 30 days, exactly, he would appear at my door with an envelope containing $200. He never stayed long. He would just hand me the money, we would exchange a few polite words about the weather or his job, and then he would leave. It was mechanical, almost transactional, but at least it was consistent. I began to relax a little, to think that maybe, just maybe, Matthew really was trying to change. That maybe this time was different. Until October came. Matthew arrived on his usual date, but this time he had a more animated expression than usual. He handed me the envelope with the money and then smiled at me in a way that put me on high alert. Mom, there's something I want to tell you. Good news. What news? Jessica and I decided to give it another shot. We're going to try to fix our marriage. She's moving into the apartment with me. I felt a coldness spread down my spine. I'm happy for you. And there's more. Her parents, well, they're still having money problems after the surgery. The medical bills were sky high, and their apartment still has mold issues. So, we thought that maybe they could stay with us for a while, just until they get back on their feet financially. There it was, the real reason for his visit. The real reason for 2 months of punctual payments. It was another strategy. Another way to soften me up to ask for something. And you're telling me this because? Because the apartment I'm renting is small. 1 bedroom. There's no space for 4 people. And I thought that, well, maybe you could help. No. The words shot out of my mouth before he could even finish the sentence. Mom, you don't even know what I was going to ask. I know exactly what you were going to ask. And the answer is no. They are not coming to live here. Not Jessica, not you, and certainly not Susan and Robert. I wasn't going to ask that. I was just going to ask if you could lend me money for a bigger apartment, just for a few months, until they get stabilized. Lend you money? Matthew, you still owe me almost $4,000, and now you want me to lend you more? It's different, Mom. This time it would be a real loan, with a signed contract, with interest if you want. All legal. The answer is still no. His expression changed. The mask of the repentant son fell away, revealing the frustration underneath. Why are you like this? Why can't you just help your family when they need you? Because I already helped, and I was robbed, and I was lied to, and I was humiliated. How many times do I have to repeat the same story before you understand that I am not falling for the same thing again? Matthew stood up abruptly. I knew you hadn't changed at all. You're still the same selfish woman you've always been. And you're still the same manipulator you've always been. The only difference is that now I know how to recognize it. He stormed out of my house, slamming the door. After that encounter, 2 weeks passed with no news from Matthew. 2 weeks of silence that I found strangely comforting. I no longer expected anything from him. I was no longer surprised by his ability to fall back into the same patterns. It was like watching a movie you had already seen too many times, knowing every scene before it happened. I focused on my life, on my routines, on the small joys I had learned to value. My plants were growing beautifully in the garden. My afternoons reading on the patio had become my favorite time of day. I had found peace in simplicity, in not having to justify myself to anyone, in not having to measure every word to avoid a conflict. But then, one Wednesday afternoon, while I was organizing some documents at my desk, I found something that made my blood run cold. It was a rental agreement, hidden among old receipts and miscellaneous papers. A contract in Matthew's name, dated 5 months ago. 5 months. That meant he had rented that apartment long before our big fight, long before he told me he needed to get away to start over. I read the entire document, feeling the rage build in my chest with every line. Matthew had signed a 12-month lease for a 2-bedroom apartment. 2 bedrooms, not the small studio he had described to me. And the start date coincided exactly with the time he had started bringing Jessica and her parents to my house more frequently. It had all been a plan. It had all been calculated. Matthew had been preparing his exit while simultaneously trying to take over my house. He had created a plan B while pretending I was his only option. And the worst part was that he had likely used more of my stolen money to pay the deposit and the first months of rent. I called Matthew immediately. He answered after several rings, his voice cautious. Mom, I found your rental agreement. The real one, not the story you sold me. There was a long silence, so long I thought for a moment he had hung up. Mom, let me explain. Explain what, Matthew? That you lied to me again? That this whole time you've been playing me while you had a perfectly livable house waiting for you? It's not what you think. I rented that place as a precaution. I didn't know how things were going to turn out between us. I needed to have a backup plan. A backup plan. Do you know what that tells me? That you never had any real intention of fixing things. That everything you've told me, every apology, every promise, has just been to keep me as your safety net while you built your life without me. It's not like that, Mom. I wanted things to work, but I also needed to protect myself. What did you want me to do? End up with nothing if you decided to kick me out for good? You wanted me to trust you while you didn't trust me. You wanted me to believe you while you were already planning your next move. Don't you see how sick that is? You're the one who cut the relationship, Mom. You're the one who made it clear I had no place in your life anymore. What was I supposed to do? Wait on the street hoping you'd change your mind? You were supposed to be honest. You were supposed to tell me the truth. But that seems to be impossible for you. Matthew let out a bitter laugh. The truth? You want the truth? The truth is, I rented that apartment because I knew this moment would eventually come. The moment you got tired of me and shut the door in my face. Because that's what you do, Mom. You set impossible conditions, and when we don't meet them, you discard us. Just like you did with Dad before he died. Those last words hit me like a slap. What does your father have to do with this? Everything. Dad spent the last years of his life trying to please you, to be enough for you, and he never was. There was always something to criticize, something to improve, and now you're doing the same thing to me. Your father was a good man who respected me, something you clearly never learned to do. Dad was afraid of you, Mom, just like I am. That's why he never contradicted you. That's why he accepted everything you said without question. It wasn't respect, it was resignation. Every word was like a poison, designed to make me doubt, to make me feel guilty, to twist the story and turn me into the villain of his narrative. And the most terrible part was that a small part of me wondered if he was right. If I had been too hard, too inflexible, too demanding. If you really believe that, I said, my voice trembling, then it's better we don't speak again. because there's no way to fix something when the foundations are this different. Maybe you're right, Matthew replied, and for the first time in our entire conversation, his voice sounded sincere. Maybe we never had a real chance. Maybe we were always destined to end up like this. Maybe, I repeated. He hung up without saying goodbye. I sat at my desk, the contract still in my hands, feeling an emptiness I did not know how to fill. Had I been too hard? Had I demanded too much? Or had I simply tried to protect myself from someone who was determined to hurt me? I called Victoria. I needed to hear the voice of someone who truly knew me, who could give me perspective without judging me. Eleanor, listen to me carefully, she said after I told her everything. Matthew is trying to manipulate you, again. He's using your husband's memory to make you feel guilty. He's trying to make you doubt yourself, so you'll lower your guard. Do not fall for his game. What if he's right? What if I've been a terrible mother? A terrible mother wouldn't have worked for 42 years to give him a roof over his head. A terrible mother wouldn't have forgiven the first theft. A terrible mother wouldn't have endured public humiliation with dignity. You're not perfect, Eleanor. No mother is. But you are not the villain Matthew wants to paint. Her words gave me some peace, but not completely. The doubts were still there, whispering in my mind during the sleepless nights. 2 more weeks passed. 2 weeks in which I tried to process everything that had happened, to find meaning in a relationship that seemed to be broken beyond repair. I began to accept that maybe Matthew and I would never have a normal relationship again, that maybe the best thing for both of us was to keep our distance. Until one Saturday in April, exactly 1 year after this all began, I heard the sound of several cars parking in front of my house. I looked out the window and felt the world stop. There was Matthew, getting out of his car. And behind him, Jessica. And behind her, Susan and Robert, carrying large suitcases. And further back, Sarah with her 2 small children, also with luggage. They were all walking toward my gate like an organized procession, like an army preparing for the final invasion. Matthew had a key in his hand. My key. The one I had asked him to return months ago. Somehow, he had copied it before giving it to me. Or perhaps he had never given me the original. It did not matter anymore. What mattered was that they were entering my property without my permission, with all their belongings, with the clear intention of staying. I ran down the stairs and reached the front door just as Matthew was opening it. I planted myself in front of him, blocking the way. "What do you think you are doing?" Matthew looked at me with an expression that was half defiance, half plea. "Mom, we need to talk. We all need a place to stay." Things got complicated. The landlord kicked me out. Jessica's parents lost their house. Sarah is going through a tough divorce. We have nowhere to go. And you decided my house was the solution without even consulting me. We didn't have time to consult you. It all happened so fast. But come on, Mom, look on the bright side. Your house is big. You have enough space for everyone. Jessica's parents can stay on the 2nd floor. Sarah and the kids in the 1st floor guest room. Jessica and I in my old room. We'll be a real family, all together, supporting each other. I looked past Matthew at the team waiting behind him. Robert had his arms crossed, his expression challenging. Susan was holding a suitcase with one hand and fanning herself with the other, as if all this drama was exhausting her. Jessica was staring at the floor, clearly uncomfortable but doing nothing to stop this. Sarah was trying to calm her children, who were running around my garden without permission. And in that moment, as I observed this surreal scene, something inside me broke. It was not sadness. It was not rage. It was absolute clarity, crystalline, final. I looked Matthew directly in the eye and said something that made everyone freeze completely. "It's a good thing your house is so big, Mom. Jessica's parents are going to live on the 2nd floor, and the 1st floor will be for her sister and the kids. We're family. It's your obligation to take them in without saying a word." Matthew said those words with a naturalness that would have been comical if it were not so offensive. As if he had just solved a simple math problem. As if my house, my space, my life, were simply resources available for his convenience. He had not asked for permission. He had not shown respect. He had simply decided this is how things would be. I remained completely still, looking at him. The silence stretched for what seemed like an eternity. Matthew was waiting for a response, probably an explosion of rage, maybe tears of frustration. Robert and Susan watched with barely disguised expressions of satisfaction, as if they had already won this battle. Sarah held her children close, preparing to enter. Jessica kept staring at the floor, unable to face what was happening. And then, in a voice so calm that it surprised even me, I said the words that would change everything. "Perfect. Then everyone stays. Everyone except you, Matthew. You get out. Now." The silence that followed was absolute. No one moved. No one breathed. Matthew looked at me as if I had just spoken in an unknown language. "What? What did you say?" "You said my house is big. And you're right. It is big. It's spacious. And it's mine. All mine. So here is my decision. Everyone can stay. Susan and Robert on the second floor. Sarah and her kids on the first floor. Jessica can stay too if she wants. But you, Matthew, you get off my property immediately. And first thing tomorrow morning, I am starting the legal proceedings to recover every cent you stole from me, plus interest, plus damages. I am going to hire the best lawyer I can find, and I am going to make sure you pay every consequence for your actions." Matthew took a step back, his face pale. "Mom, you can't be serious." "I have never been more serious in my entire life. You were the one who made the decision to bring all these people to my house without consulting me. You were the one who decided I didn't deserve respect, that my opinion didn't matter, that my boundaries didn't exist. Now I am making my own decision. And my decision is that you get out of my life, permanently." Robert stepped forward, his expression confused. "Wait, you're saying we can stay?" "Of course. Matthew said you're family. And if you're family, you deserve a roof over your heads. So go ahead, bring your bags up, get settled. Make my house your home. There's only one condition. Matthew does not enter. Not today, not tomorrow, not ever again." Susan and Robert looked at each other, clearly baffled by this unexpected turn of events. Sarah had stopped trying to control her children and was watching us with wide eyes. Matthew turned to Jessica, looking for support. "Are you going to allow this? Are you going to let her kick me out like this?" Jessica finally looked up. Her eyes were full of tears. "Matthew, I don't know what to say. This is too much. Jessica, I'm your husband. You're supposed to be on my side. I have been on your side this whole time. When you took money from your mom without telling me, when you humiliated her at my parents' house, when you planned all of this without considering her feelings, I was always on your side. But this is wrong, and I think you know it." Matthew looked at her with an expression of absolute betrayal. Then he turned to his sister. "Sarah, are you going to stand there quietly too?" Sarah looked down. "Matthew, I'm sorry, but I need a place for my children, and if Eleanor is offering, you're all traitors. All of you." "We're not traitors," I said, my voice firm. "We are simply accepting your own proposal. You said this house was big enough for everyone. And it is. It just doesn't include space for someone who has proven, time and time again, that he doesn't know what it means to respect his own mother." Matthew looked at me with a mixture of rage, pain, and something resembling fear. He realized he had lost, that his master plan had backfired in the most unexpected way possible. "You can't do this," he whispered, but his voice had no conviction left. "I can, and I am. Now get off my property before I call the police." "The police? You'd call the police on your own son?" "I'd call the police on a trespasser who entered my home without permission, using a key he copied illegally. You choose which one you'd rather be. My son who leaves of his own free will, or a criminal who is escorted out by the authorities." Matthew opened his mouth to reply, but no sound came out. He just stood there, shaking, his eyes filling with tears he refused to shed. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he turned around and walked to his car. We all watched him in silence. He got into the vehicle, slammed the door, and just sat there for several minutes. I could see his silhouette through the windshield, his head resting on the steering wheel. Part of me wanted to run out, to hug him, to tell him it would all be okay. But the stronger part, the part that had learned to protect itself, held firm. Finally, Matthew started the engine and drove away. I watched him disappear down the street until the sound of the car faded completely. I turned back to the group still standing in my garden, all of them with expressions of absolute shock. "Now," I said, my voice calm but firm, "I need all of you to listen very carefully to what I am about to say. No one is staying in this house. Not Susan, not Robert, not Sarah, not the children, and not Jessica. You all have exactly 5 minutes to gather your things and get off my property. If you don't, I will be calling the police for real this time." Robert exploded. "You tricked us. You said we could stay." I said that so Matthew would understand the absurdity of his proposal, so he would feel even a fraction of the pain and betrayal he has made me feel for this entire time. But now, the show is over. Leave. Susan pointed a finger at me, her face red with fury. "You're a manipulative witch, a heartless woman. You did that to your own son." I showed my own son the consequences of his actions. I taught him that he cannot keep using people without expecting them to eventually fight back. And now, I'm teaching you all the same lesson. This is my house, my space, my sanctuary, and none of you are welcome here. Sarah gathered her children quickly. "I'm sorry, Eleanor. We shouldn't have come like this." "You're right. This was wrong." "I know," I replied simply. One by one, they picked up their suitcases and headed for their cars. Jessica was the last to move. She approached me before leaving. "Eleanor, I'm sorry for everything. Matthew convinced me this was a good idea. He said that deep down, you wanted us to come back, that you just needed someone to take the initiative. He lied to me, too." "I know," I repeated. "And now you have to decide if you want to keep standing by someone who lies to get what he wants." Jessica nodded slowly, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I think I already know the answer to that question." She left without another word. When the last car disappeared from view, I locked the gate, changed every lock on the house, and finally, I could breathe. That night, I sat on my patio with a hot cup of tea. The sky was clear, full of stars that shone with an intensity I had not noticed in a long time. The cool air brushed against my skin. Everything was silent, peaceful. I thought about Matthew, about the little boy he had been, about the man he had become, about all the chances I had given him, about all the times I had forgiven, hoping for a change that never came. And for the first time, I felt no guilt for what I had done. I felt no regret. I just felt relief. I got up and walked through my house, through my rooms, through my garden, through every corner that had been invaded, threatened, nearly stolen. But now it was mine again, completely mine. And as I watched the sunrise from my window the next morning, I understood something fundamental. I had spent so much time worrying about being a good mother that I had forgotten to be good to myself. I had sacrificed my peace, my dignity, my happiness, trying to hold together a family that was hell-bent on destroying itself. But not anymore. After so many battles, after so much disappointment and pain, I had finally learned the most important lesson. Love, without respect, is just a slow, painful way to lose your peace. And I had already lost enough. It was time to take back everything that had been taken from me, starting with my own life. Matthew never came back. I heard through the grapevine that he and Jessica got divorced 3 months later, that he had to declare bankruptcy because of the accumulated debts, that he finally had to face the consequences of all his actions without having anyone to rescue him. And I moved on. I lived every day on my own terms, without apologizing for protecting myself, without feeling guilty for choosing myself. Because in the end, peace is not something you negotiate, it is something you defend.